Hi everyone, my name is Robin Lewis, and in this video I'm going to be making a stool out of this piece of what I think is spotted gum. I got this board probably about a year ago. It was the start of last year's cyclone season and we're coming up to that again now. So it's about a year. A friend of a friend was getting the tree removed from her front yard just in case any high winds came along, the tree would have fallen on her house. So I jumped on it, got hold of the logs and had them milled up. This is just one of the smaller sections from it. As I said, it's been about a year since I had it milled up, and I ran this through the thicknesser and skip planed it about 3 months ago. And when it came out, it is just the most silky smooth wood grain I think I've ever touched. It's also incredibly solid and hard. And the minute it came out of the thicknesser, I knew exactly what I wanted to do with this. Since then, it has lost a little moisture and the wood has moved slightly. So the first thing I need to do before working on the leg assembly is get this board flat and true. And for that, I'm going to be using the router jig behind me. This is just a really simple router jig made from some melamine screwed together to allow my trim router to run through. It only took a couple of passes because the wood hadn't moved that much. So it was about 3 passes later and the slab was flat. Then using that flat side as a reference, I could run it through the thickness planer a few times and then end up with 2 parallel surfaces. This is as far as I'm going to go with the stool top for now. The next thing is going to be to use this to measure the leg assembly off. This is some leftover spotted gum that I used in a dining table build not too long ago. I'll link in the description. It used to be part of the house, but when I demoed the downstairs area from our workshop, this was what was left. It's really nice timber, it's really hard, and the first thing I did was split it down the center. Then I could flatten one side and glue 2 pieces together to get the thickness that I needed. I made another 4 blanks like we saw yesterday, so these are the 4 that I filmed, and here is another 4. The next step is for me to start milling these down to size, so that's 25 by 30 millimeters, and normally you'd go straight to the jointer, but what I'm going to do first is get these close to a flat edge with the hand plane, then I'll go over to the jointer and carry on milling from there. I'm finished over on the jointer, so the next step is to run these boards through the thicknesser. So what I'm going to make sure is from the center line, I'll measure out half of the distance of the final width that I want, and then while I'm running it through the thicknesser, I'm constantly changing sides so that I work towards that line, and that way I can keep this really interesting pattern. The first joint I did was this corner bridle joint. So I worked out the angle that I wanted to use, which was 7.5 degrees, and then started cutting away the inside material. So the simpler answer is just to have the builders I cut close to but not on the line. I would get to that later with the chisel, and that way I could really dial it in. I cut a couple of blocks at 7.5 degrees and used those as references for when I was chiseling out at this angle. Then using that first half of the join, I could mark on the mating piece where I needed to remove the cheeks. And then once I was happy with both bridle joins on both leg assemblies, I could then move on to the next join, which was going to be an angled traditional mortise and tenon. I marked out where I wanted the mortise, and then I'd hog the majority of the material out at the drill press. A while ago, I had someone ask me about this lighting rig that I've got set up on my drill press. There's an LED strip on the underside. This is just one of those cheap LED strips you can buy on Amazon, or I think I might have actually got this from one of my local big box stores. That runs off to a power adapter into the same plug as the drill press. So when I turn on the drill press, the light comes on. This is just a simple piece of timber that pushes up over, I'm not actually sure what this part of the drill press is called, but it's the bit just above the chuck. So when you drop this down, the entire rig moves down with it. And that's really all there is to it. So just it's pushed up with a friction fit, sits on there, and as you move the drill press, as the bit goes up and down, so the lights follow it. It's incredibly simple. It took me an afternoon to throw together, but it's amazing how well it works. And then once I got rid of most of the material, I could square up the inside edge using a router. Now that I'd finished creating the two side assemblies, but I hadn't glued them yet, I turned my attention to this rail that was going to join the two of them together. On either end, this is going to have a wedge, and that's going to slot into the two side assemblies, so as they want to move apart because they're going to be splayed, this wedge will pull them in together. I didn't go into any detail on the top rail, the one that sits just underneath the slab, because it's just a simple half lap join. Now with everything dry fit and ready for glue, the next step was to give everything a round over and sand all the parts. For the side assemblies, I just used regular old wood glue, but for these cross members, I used epoxy. I'll go into more detail as to why I did that at the end of the video. It's been a couple days, the glue's dried. I've gone around just chopping off any of the excess bits, and I've also added 2 of these pins into each end of the top rail. Unlike the bottom rail, which has this wedge holding it in place, this top rail doesn't, just because I didn't want to go to that extra step because you're not going to see this. But what I have done is use these 2 pins to hold it in place. The next step is for me to change the top angle of these 2 side assemblies. You can see this is splayed out, so the top surface of these are tilted inwards. So what I need to do is remove some material and get these flat so that when the top comes down, it's going to be sitting on a flat surface. With the slab sitting flat on the top of the leg assembly, I could start working on all of the smaller details like pillowing this wedged cross member on the bottom and flushing up the cross member on the top. And then some final sanding up to 320 grit, and then I could apply finish. In this case, I'm using a tung oil for the entire piece. To attach the leg assembly to the slab, I drilled some elongated holes into the leg assembly. This would allow the slab to expand and contract with seasonal changes. So if you made it this far in the video, I'm very impressed. This was a very long build. It's taken me around 6 weeks to finish, and I'm pretty glad that it's done. Overall, I'm extremely happy with how this turned out. There's 3 different types of joins here that are all new to me. There's an angled bridle join up at the top. Further down, we've got an angled traditional mortise and tenon, and then we've got this sort of wedge rail stretcher down below. All 3 of these I've never done before, so this was it was probably the most technical build I've ever done. So what I want to do is just go through some of the design elements and talk about why I chose what I did. The first thing are these bridle joints up at the top. I've always liked the look of a bridle joint because you have that end grain, long grain contrast. I just think it's really nice. And that's why I've extended these top rails a little bit further than the actual live edge piece on the top. The idea is I want these to be seen. These are one of the focal points, and that's why I've chosen this particular joint up at the top. The next one is this wedge rail. I'm not really sure if you'd call it a dovetail or a wedge, but I'm going to use the term wedge because that's what it's acting as. Because these legs are going to want to splay out as you put pressure on the top, these wedges are going to stop that. So the legs are going to pull into that wedge and be stopped. I mean, to be fair, it's going to take a lot of force to do that. So it's probably never going to pull into that wedge as much as it should. But that was the original design. And when I glued it up, I tried to pull them in so it was under tension as the glue dried. You might also notice that the rail is not flush with the side rails. And that was always part of the design. It's not flush on either side, so you can feel this, and I've really pillowed these edges so you can feel where that goes into the side rails. That was just an aesthetic choice. I think it looks pretty nice, and I'm quite happy with how that turned out. You might have also noticed on these 2 bottom rails, on the outside is this effect. Now, someone once told me that it's called fish scaling, but I'm not sure if that's the right word. It's where you take 2 pieces, glue them together so they're mirrored. The glue joint becomes the fish spine, and then these patterns coming off become the fish ribs. So it's a very distinct look. I've tried to keep that on the outside, and I think it turned out pretty good. You can really see it. It's a very distinct look, and because of the type of wood that this is, it's really shown up nicely. You'll also notice on the bottom rails, the joins are actually pillowed on the edges, and the reason for that is these joins won't as tight as I wanted. There were some gaps between them and it just didn't look so good. So what I thought I could do is just round over all the joins. That way that looks like it's part of the design. And now you don't notice those gaps as much because of that rounding effect. Now, one of the things that I was quite disappointed by, and I say that with a little bit of reservation because this is the first time I've done all of these joins. So I expected a lot of trouble, but I was a little bit disappointed by the accuracy of the cuts and the joins. These two side assemblies went together with normal wood glue because they were fine. The joins were good, they worked well. But these top two pieces, I've used epoxy to give me enough time for, during the glue up, and also to fill gaps because epoxy is better at that. All of these joins, well, the majority of these joins have been cut by hand. So I've introduced this tiny bit of inaccuracy with each join. And when you've got angled and splayed legs, each little bit of inaccuracy tends to build up. So what you don't see in the video, this top rail underneath the top piece, I've actually had to almost force that down and clamp it in place because these angles just didn't quite line up the way I wanted them to. I think it's fine and it's not going to be a problem, it's going to hold together, but you don't really want that kind of tension in there because a lot of these joins are just relying on glue, so you don't want that tension in there forcing them apart. But as I say, I don't want to harp too much on it. All three of these joins are new to me, so it was a real technical build, and when I put it in that light, I'm actually pretty happy with how it turned out. So thanks again for watching, everyone. This has without a doubt been the most technical build on my channel, and I'm very happy to have finally reached that finish line. So my name is Robin Lewis. If you enjoyed this video, please go ahead and click that thumbs up, and if you enjoy this type of content, I want to encourage you to subscribe. Thanks again for watching, and I'll talk to you guys soon.